They conquered vast empires, not with armies, but by mastering the quiet art of terrifying their powerful enemies everywhere. Their name brought dread to kings, making men in power tremble in the safest parts of their castles at night. This mysterious group discovered that controlling human fear was more effective than commanding thousands of armed soldiers in open battle. In dark corners, whispers spread stories of unseen shadows who could end lives quickly and then vanish into thin air. But who were these people, and how did they create a system that terrified the most powerful leaders alive? They were known as the Assassins, a title that now defines political murder, but their true story is stranger. The story begins in a divided land, filled with religious conflict, political instability, and a great fear of total chaos. A brilliant leader emerged from this chaos, offering a strange new hope, but requiring absolute loyalty and dangerous sacrifice. How did this single man find the perfect place to build his secretive order far away from any major authority? The location he chose would soon become the legendary center of all their operations, a place of extreme mystery. The fortress of Alamut was never captured by force during the entire peak of the assassins' mysterious, shadowy power. It was captured, not with swords, but through clever deception by the Order's visionary, intelligent founder, Hassan-i Sabbah. Hassan-i Sabbah was a brilliant scholar, charismatic leader, and a master of psychological manipulation who saw the world differently. He was a master of asymmetric warfare, knowing his small group could never defeat their powerful enemies in open combat. Hassan saw an invisible way to exert influence, and his strategy required a remote, safe fortress like Alamut. He spent years traveling across the region, quietly building support, gathering followers, and looking for his ideal stronghold location. Once he seized the mountain fortress, he spent the rest of his long life focused within its fortified walls. How did one man, confined to a small room, successfully command a network that terrified kings many miles away? His influence was purely mental, based on devotion, discipline, and a shocking concept of ultimate, blind obedience to him. This perfect obedience was essential for the next terrifying phase of his secret, revolutionary plan for regional control. Alamut was designed as a self-sustaining ecosystem, with advanced water systems that ensured the order could survive long sieges. This high mountain fortress was not only a safe place to hide, but it was also a university. Hassan developed a sophisticated, highly structured library within the fortress walls that contained ancient knowledge of science and philosophy. The recruits were trained physically, but they were also trained mentally to be intelligent, patient, and highly disciplined operatives. They studied geography, political structures, and multiple languages to blend easily into any target city, undetected by guards. But this education served a specific purpose, preparing them for missions from which they would likely never return. They became known as the Fedayeen, the self-sacrifices, willing to give their lives to execute Hassan's complex orders. How could these intelligent men be so easily convinced to throw away their lives in such a dramatic way? This leads to the center of the most famous legend about the order, involving a hidden paradise and drug use. But was this garden of paradise real, or was it just another myth created to explain their frightening loyalty? The assassins did not need large armies to change history. They needed only a single, perfectly aimed striking hand. Hassan-i Sabbah invented political assassination as a high-precision, strategic tool, focusing exclusively on very powerful, high-value individuals. Their primary targets were the political and religious leaders who opposed the order's specific religious or political beliefs. They did not waste resources fighting low-level soldiers. They always aimed straight for the head of the opposing structure. This unique strategy allowed a tiny group to exert enormous political influence over much larger and stronger surrounding empires. Hassan's method was psychologically devastating. The more guards the target had, the more powerful the assassin's final strike appeared. The strategy was designed to paralyze entire leadership structures, leaving everyone in power distrusting those around them completely. If even the most powerful sultan could be killed, who among the other leaders was truly safe anymore? This climate of extreme, pervasive terror made rulers desperate to avoid making enemies of the shadowy, hidden order. But where did the name assassin come from, and why did it become linked forever to such intense dread? The name assassin is based on the word hashishin, which is a negative term meaning hashish user. This label was likely given by their enemies to describe their supposedly wild, drug-fueled, and irrational violent behavior. The legend, popular in the West, says they were drugged into a deep, dreamlike state to experience paradise. The story was made famous by travelers like Marco Polo, who likely heard the exaggerated tales many years later. According to this myth, Hassan gave them hashish and then moved them into a secret, beautiful garden within the fortress. When they woke up, surrounded by luxury, they truly believed they had visited the afterlife and the true paradise. They were then told they could return to this paradise only after they successfully completed their dangerous missions. This legend offered a very simple explanation for their amazing bravery, explaining why they feared no enemy. But modern historians strongly believe this entire story of drug use was simply an effective piece of negative propaganda. So if drug-induced dreams were not the reason, what was the real source of their absolute devotion? The Fedayeen's incredible focus was not fueled by hashish, but by extreme devotion to their specific religious and political leader. Their loyalty was built through a very long and careful process of intense indoctrination and elite, multi-layered education. The real strength of the order was their mental discipline, patience, and absolute confidence in their ultimate mission. Hassan selected only the most intelligent, promising, and adaptable young recruits from the local villages they controlled. They spent years in training at Alamut, learning not only how to fight but how to wait without moving. They were trained to blend perfectly into any specific target's environment, from royal courts to simple marketplaces. They learned to observe their target, sometimes for weeks, waiting for the one perfect moment to strike. Their training was comprehensive, making them some of the most specialized and effective operatives in the entire medieval world. If they were not drugged fanatics but intelligent, elite soldiers, does that make them even more dangerous? This patience leads us to their next terrifying aspect, the very public nature of their final, dramatic execution. The execution itself was only one small part of the assassin's powerful, theatrical psychological warfare strategy. They almost always struck in the most crowded, public place possible, often during a large religious ceremony. The Fedayeen would wait until the powerful target was at their most visible and exposed moment. They used small daggers, which required them to be extremely close to their victim to succeed. The assassination was a performance designed to send a loud message of utter vulnerability to all the other rulers. This meant the Fedayeen was usually captured or killed immediately by the target's guards after the public act. This very public death confirmed their complete lack of fear, amplifying the terrifying legend around the order. Why did they choose a short knife instead of a more practical method like poison or a distant arrow? The knife strike was personal, unavoidable, and far more shocking for the public to witness than a silent, unseen poison. This public method was used on their very first target, who was one of the most powerful leaders in the land. The assassination of Nizam al-Mulk, the highly respected Grand Vizier of the Seljuk Empire, changed everything. Nizam al-Mulk was a brilliant man, but he was also the leading enemy of the order, dedicated to their total destruction. He was traveling in a large procession through a city, surrounded by many elite guards for his personal safety. The assassin, dressed as a very poor holy mystic, approached the vizier's carriage with a simple petition. At the exact moment Nizam al-Mulk reached out to take the document, the fedayeen struck him with a dagger. The vizier died quickly, and the fedayeen was killed instantly by the shocked guards, exactly as planned. The order immediately claimed responsibility for this very high-profile death, making their name known across multiple empires. This killing proved that no person, regardless of their immense power or number of guards, was truly safe from their reach. How could any organization defend against a single person who had no fear of their own death? The true goal of this execution was not just one death, but the total spread of a devastating fear. The order understood that fear was not just an emotion, but was a strategic weapon to control political events. Their entire reputation was carefully managed to make every natural death of a leader seem like their direct action. This strategy meant they did not always have to kill to exert their powerful influence over regional politics. Stories of their power grew far beyond the truth, and rulers became willing to pay just to avoid their attention. How did the assassins ensure that this invisible, psychological fear remained strong even between their dramatic public operations? They used simple but psychologically powerful symbols, such as leaving a dagger on a ruler's pillow in the safe, protected dark. One legend tells of a sultan who awoke to find a dagger on his pillow, placed silently by a close, trusted advisor. The accompanying note simply said, "We have you whenever we want, even when you believe you are safest." The target, now knowing his internal, safe security was completely broken, immediately agreed to the order's specific demands. The greatest weapon, of course, was the mystery around them, making people believe they were everywhere, unseen. Almost everything we know today about the assassins was written by their many enemies, or much later by European travelers. The order's own internal records, which contained their true philosophy and specific history, were likely completely destroyed. So much of the traditional story is probably exaggerated. They were likely neither simple drug addicts nor perfect super soldiers. The myth of the Paradise Garden was probably invented to explain their perfect discipline to an outside world. They were not supernatural killers. They were smart, well-educated men who believed deeply in a religious and political cause. They were an effective organization because their methods were specialized for an era with limited communication and slow political responses. But the legend of the all-knowing, omnipresent, hidden killer was far more convenient for their powerful enemies to spread. Did Hassan-i Sabbah deliberately use this negative propaganda to strengthen the order's terrifying, powerful reputation? This manipulation of reality is what makes the historical truth so very difficult to separate from the powerful, ancient myth. The order would soon face its most powerful test, not from a political rival, but from a total apocalypse from the east. The end of the assassins was as dramatic as their beginning, brought by the unstoppable, colossal force of the Mongols. The Mongols did not care about psychological warfare. They simply annihilated everything and everyone that was in their way. They launched a multi-year campaign focused exclusively on systematic, physical destruction of all the Order's fortified strongholds. Even the remote fortress of Alamut, the center of their power, could not survive the Mongols' devastating siege engines and tactics. The last Grand Master of the Order eventually surrendered the fortress, hoping to save his remaining people from total slaughter. But the Mongols rarely showed mercy, and the Grand Master was taken prisoner and then soon executed by them. This was the end of their political power, their fortresses, their state, and most of their central organization. The Mongol invasion destroyed their visible, powerful physical state, but did it also destroy the powerful idea they had created? The visible fortress was gone, but the name of the assassins would become more powerful than the group itself. The Mongols destroyed their physical strongholds, but the very word assassin would live on for over 700 years. The Order's specialized, asymmetric strategy of targeted killing did not disappear. It became a global model for centuries. They proved that a very small, dedicated group could terrify a much larger and technologically superior political structure. Their story is a perfect example of how strategic, psychological fear can amplify a group's power far beyond its size. The original goal of Hassan-i Sabbah was political and religious, but their methods are now used for many reasons. The Fedayeen were willing to sacrifice everything, and that absolute level of commitment is still terrifying to powerful societies today. But how much of our current understanding of them is built on the ancient myths of their enemies? We are still fascinated by the idea of the perfect, unseen killer who can reach even the most protected places. The assassins, once a localized power in the mountains, are now a permanent myth in our global history. The real story of Alamut is gone, but the invisible, terrifying shadow of the Order still influences our world today.